Welcome back, everybody. I'm really excited to have this next guest on. I brought him on many times as a private lawyer, as a managing partner of the Parlatore Group. Today, I'm bringing him here because he's a commander in the Navy Reserve. He's doing a lot of advice to Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and he knows the real truth about the signal report that came out today, what you're not getting from the media. Joining us right now, our good friend, Tim Parlatore. Tim, great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes. All right. So I saw these anonymous reports, and I've become incredibly suspicious of anonymous media reports. But they say, oh, the whole essence of the report is that Secretary of War Hegseth jeopardized national security by putting some information onto a Signal chat and sharing it with other members of the administration. Now, I remember he was accused of leaking classified information. I also thought that this wasn't odd. Tell us what the report really says that the media isn't telling us.
So, yeah, the report is going to be released in its unclassified form tomorrow. And, there's a couple of pieces that are classified. So obviously we're not going to talk about that. But right. Overall, when you read it tomorrow, you're going to see that it totally exonerates Pete Hegseth. There's no classified material in those texts. Everything he declassified that he has within his authority to declassify. And that's the majority of what this report, talks about. And so I can understand why, a day ahead of time, of course, it went over to the Hill today. And so, the Senate and congressional Democrats, they wanted to put out, the one piece of the report that I knew that this was what they were going to do. There is a tiny little section in there that's really untethered from the rest of the report, where the investigator states their opinion that having this information out there on an unclassified system could have endangered the troops. But the problem is, it is completely untethered from the rest of the report. It doesn't cite to a single source, not a single document, not a single interview, because it's not something that the IG was investigating. They weren't looking at what the impact of this would have been. So they were focusing on classified information. Did he violate that? Did he put out classified information? And the answer is no, totally exonerated.
Wow.
And whether it is a good means of communication or not matters not, because this was something that was standard practice during the Biden administration as well. Again, something that the media doesn't really want to talk about. But this has been used for a while, right?
So that's actually another big part of this report, is it talks about how, the use of Signal, it's not a Pete Hegseth issue. It's not a Trump administration issue. It's a whole of government issue that really, the use of Signal has proliferated ever since, 2020, when, the government shut down for COVID and all of a sudden everybody had to go home. And, for that couple of weeks, the entire United States government ran on Signal. And it's not because they're trying to avoid the Federal Records Act or FOIA or anything like that. It's because Signal is secure so they can talk about it without the Chinese listening in. And so the use of Signal has become, so widespread throughout government, throughout the entire Biden administration. This report actually notes that the former secretary, Austin, actually used to bring his personal cell phone into the office, into the SKIF, in violation of the law. And that was something that, was passed down to Secretary Hegseth when he took over. And he said, well, I'm not going to do that. And so he wanted to do it a different way, because he wanted to comply with the law. But when he took office, he was told, hey, all of this stuff this is how it's done. It's all done by Signal. And, so that, yes, there is a recommendation that to comply with the Federal Records Act, we need to, look at this and maybe do some training for senior officials on, what the best systems are. But that's not the main point of the article or of the investigation. The main point is that there was no classified information in that text.
Yeah, and that's really important because the original story suggested outright that Pete Hegseth was sharing classified information on Signal. The IG unambiguously concludes that that was not true, right?
Correct. He is the original classifying authority. He has unfettered discretion to decide what to unclassify, how, and when. It's just like the president. The president also has unfettered discretion to do that. And so if he decides to take certain portions of this, move it to an unclassified system so he can send it out to the other principals, which, by the way, the reason he did that, at the time, they were talking to partner forces to give them a heads up on what was going on. And then about an hour later, the other people on that text thread all went out on TV and gave interviews about what we had just done. And they were being given the details that they were allowed to talk about on TV, unclassified.
Amazing. Wow, what a difference from the original story we were told.
Absolutely. Tim, what you're telling us about Lloyd Austin bringing his cell phone into the SKIF, I mean, that is something that even the general public knows that you don't do. That, to me, seems that it fits very well within the wheelhouse of an administration that really had a cavalier attitude towards a lot of things, but especially security, and in this case, national security.
Correct. And it was one of those things that when Secretary Hegseth took office, they told him this, and he said, well, I don't want to do it that way. And the report talks about how he went to the communications team and said, can you find a way that is legal and secure that would allow me to access signal from inside the office without bringing my cell phone in? And they had rigged a device. Essentially, his phone would be plugged in outside, and he'd have a monitor and keyboard inside the office so that he could do that. And, which of course has been misreported in initial media reports of an unsecured line and everything. But that's what they did at his request of, I don't want to do what Lloyd Austin did. I don't want to break the law. Give me something that's legal and secure.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of media not telling us the truth, the new media pool's in, all the rules are there. And you know what? Not once have I had to submit a story to Pete Hegseth for prior approval because it was never in the rules. It wasn't true. Give us a little update on just how well the new press pool and the new press operations are going.
Well, to be 100% accurate, John, it was in the rules back in the 1940s.
It was in the 40s. That's right. We wrote that story.
Yes, back in the Office of Censorship. I think the new media is doing great. We had... I had many interviews today down with them. I got to meet a lot of them. And, they are asking very good, hard, tough questions, relevant questions, respectfully, to really try to cover what the department is actually doing. And one of the things that I really like about this group is that they are trying to cover the actual news. And, look, they were asking me very tough questions about, whether it's signal or, the boat strikes or things like that. But it wasn't gotcha stuff where, okay, we don't want to hear about any of the good things the department is doing. We only want to figure out some way to attack and kill Pete Hegseth, which is really what we had been seeing before. So I'm very excited about it. I think that the communications team, Sean Parnell and his team did a phenomenal job of putting together the past few days. And I think we're all very happy with it.
Are you seeing some signs in some of the media that dropped out of buyer's remorse and wish they were back in?
I have heard rumblings about that. The original, they were told, what was in this instruction. I think a lot of them didn't even bother to read it themselves. They were told by their lawyers, by their bosses, oh, this requires you to submit your stories for publication review, none of which is true. And I think that, the performative walkout that they did was really probably more of a negotiation tactic, expecting us to cave as opposed to bringing in new media. And I think a lot of them do at this point regret it, and they realize, the lawyers screwed them by not giving them an accurate, account of what is in that document. And look, to be fair, this all happened during the shutdown, and this is a unique point. The department normally would have put that instruction up on the website. But because of the shutdown, they were prohibited from putting it up on the website. And so therefore, all the media and everybody else, they didn't get to read the actual document, though they probably could have looked for it to find it. Instead, they just relied
found it in 2 seconds.
Summaries. Yeah, well, you found it because you looked. Everybody else relied on summaries.
It just required looking. Yes. Tim Parlatore, every time we have you on, you get us looking, you get us thinking. Most importantly, you get us the truth. Great to have you on the show tonight, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, what a great interview. All right, folks, quick commercial break. We've got one more fun one to go. I've been waiting to have this guy in for a few weeks. He's got a new book on UFOs, or UAPs as they're called. You're not going to want to miss it. That's how we're going to finish the show, but after these messages.